Hey, it's Alan, and I just wanted to let you know that you can now listen to the ongoing history of new music early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. Here is another trip into the ongoing history of New Music Vault. With over 1,000 original radio episodes, and several hundred of them being repurposed as podcasts, there are still some episodes that haven't seen the light of day. For this one, it's the second of a two-part look at censorship in music. Why do certain songs or bands or styles of music get censored? Who makes these decisions? Why? And what can musicians and music fans do about it? Even though this show is from the earlier part of the ongoing history library, I think this is from 1999, it's still very relevant. We thought you'd like to have a listen. This is Censorship in Music, Part 2.
Good evening. The following is a continuation of our documentary on the subject of censorship in music. Sorry we didn't get all this in last time, it's just that this is such a big topic, we just plumb ran out of time. This portion of the program will feature controversies surrounding t-shirts, public musical performances, and schools, and you will hear how various levels of government have actively pursued the censorship of music. Some of what you're about to hear will shock and frighten you, and may increase your sense of paranoia. Alternatively, others may find the following information oddly comforting. And here's the disclaimer. Sensitive people should get the f*** out of the room. Just in case. Are they gone? Okay. Let a f***ing rip.
This is the Ongoing History of New Music podcast with Alan Cross.
Hello again, I'm Alan Cross, and this is part 2 of a look at the issue of censorship in music. This is a pretty touchy subject, and it's getting touchier and weirder all the time. We actually have it pretty good in Canada. Most levels of government don't meddle with our music, most times. And when they do, chances are that they start from a misinformed position. One of the dumbest examples happened here in Toronto on New Year's Eve 1992. The Bare Naked Ladies had been booked to play a big party at Nathan Phillips Square in the front of City Hall. However, Mayor June Rowlands had other ideas. Her politically correct advisors brought this concert to her attention, and just to be safe, she ordered the city to ban the ladies from the square. Why? Well, because the name Bare Naked Ladies was bad and evil, because it objectified women and therefore was extremely offensive. You can probably imagine the howls of outrage and laughter.
And if I had $1 million, I'd buy a
For the record, the name Bare Naked Ladies is not supposed to be interpreted as sexist. Ed Robertson explains. The name is just sort of naivete. It's supposed to be kids' language. It's supposed to imply children's excitement. Okay, so there. Let's go through a few more cases of misinterpreted intentions. The Cure ran into trouble with their very first single. It was a short song called Killing an Arab. Robert Smith based the song on a novel called The Stranger by Albert Camus. He had run across the novel while in school, and he was really impressed by the novel's existentialist philosophies. The problem started because of the title. The Cure were young and naive and didn't think of the dangers of releasing a song with such a provocative title. Now, at first glance, it's easy to assume that there might be some racist overtones to the song, and a lot of people who had never read the Camus novel jumped to conclusions. As a result, Killing an Arab has been occasionally banned in certain jurisdictions and subject to intense official scrutiny in others. People actually started a riot over the song at a Cure show in February 1979. But if these folks had taken the time to ask or read the novel, they'd see that Killing an Arab actually contains an anti-racist message. Now here's the kicker. The Cure originally recorded that single for a label they absolutely hated. In order to get out of that contract, they had to sign away most of the future royalties from that song. So in other words, they had to endure all this controversy and hassle generated by this song while making almost zero money from it.
I can turn and walk away, or I can fire the gun. Staring at the sky, staring at the sun. Whichever I choose, it amounts to the same. Absolutely nothing. I'm alive. I'm dead.
In North America, we sometimes hear about stores like Walmart refusing to stock certain records because they object to the content or the artwork. We talked about some of those controversies in the last program. Well, the same kind of thing has happened in Britain. Here's an example. In 1984, the Smiths released a single entitled Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now. Okay, that's fine. But the B-side, well, there's your problem. It was a song called Suffer Little Children. It was based on a series of gruesome child murders that took place in the UK back in the 1960s. Morrissey was fascinated by the case and he wrote the song to mourn the victims. But one evening, a relative of one of the murdered children was in the pub having a few pints, and someone went over to the jukebox and punched up a song, which just happened to be Suffer Little Children. Well, the relative was outraged by what he heard, and he took his outrage to a local Manchester newspaper, which in turn turned everything into a front-page story. And the fallout from this was incredible. Large chain stores immediately banned the single and the Smiths' debut album to boot. Parents of the murdered children were in the paper and on TV and on the radio accusing the Smiths of sensationalism and profiting from their pain and tragedy. The Smiths were rather shocked at being so misinterpreted. Morrissey wrote letters to the parents and called them on the phone apologizing for the misunderstanding. And eventually, though, things worked out. Even the relative who had heard the song in the pub had to admit that Suffer Little Children wasn't offensive at all. Anyway, this story has a happy ending. The Smiths even went so far as to donate some of the royalties from this song to charity.
Oh, Manchester, so much to answer for.
When we return, our censorship and music program will move to the United States to see what happens when music clashes with the First Amendment and schools. This gets pretty weird. Music and school often doesn't mix all that well, and the result is often some kind of censorship. And let's start with a few examples of that. Zeeland High School in Michigan has a very strict dress code. Students are not allowed to wear any clothing that bears the name of artists whose music or reputation may be considered offensive or implies obscenity, violence, drugs, alcohol, or sexual innuendo. In the spring of 1998, the principal suspended 3 students for wearing Korn and Marilyn Manson t-shirts. Both bands were on the school's forbidden clothing list. All right, fine, schools have rules and have a right to enforce them. However, this t-shirt case was turned into an international controversy when the assistant principal was quoted in the local newspaper. Korn is indecent, vulgar, obscene, and intends to be insulting. Wearing the name Korn is no different than a person wearing a middle finger on their shirt. Well, when Korn heard about this, they threatened the school with a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. In the end, nothing happened. Korn, Marilyn Manson, and filter t-shirts are still not allowed at Zeeland High, but weirdly enough, the policy doesn't forbid the wearing of Limp Bizkit t-shirts. Why? Well, Limp Bizkit isn't on the list. There was another t-shirt controversy in a school in Ohio. Will's Intermediate Middle School banned all t-shirts with satanic pictures and messages. Fans of Bauhaus and the Sisters of Mercy and Nine Inch Nails and Marilyn Manson cried foul. They said, hey, what about all those kids wearing those t-shirts from Christian bands featuring quotes from the Bible? School officials thought this one over and then banned the Christian t-shirts as well. Another fight erupted at Westerly High School in Westerly, Rhode Island. A student was suspended twice for wearing a white zombie t-shirt. Why? Because the shirt displayed the number 666, which they considered to be offensive. The assistant principal based his decision on the fact that this was a biblical reference and therefore disruptive to other students. Here's one more story about music and schools. A group from Fort Worth, Texas, called the Crime Prevention Resource Center, conducts what they call training seminars for teachers and law enforcement officials. These seminars carry titles like Marilyn Manson and Other Cults, The Impact on Education. This group believes that schools should classify fans of Marilyn Manson and other goth rock bands in the same category as members of street gangs. This is what the director of this program tells teachers. Most of these fans take drugs. A majority of them spread graffiti in the neighborhood, on school premises, and through their textbooks. and he honestly believes that the majority of goth rock fans engage in regular ritual sacrifices. If you allow these kinds of students into your classroom, he says, it's disruptive to the educational process. The Crime Prevention Resource Center goes on to say that school officials should be allowed to search the lockers of Marilyn Manson fans. They should monitor what books they read and what websites they visit. They also counsel parents and ask them to consider having their child hospitalized for a psychological evaluation if they think he or she may be a goth rock fan. Then again, one of the pamphlets handed out by this group also cautioned people of the evil occult imagery found in music by the Beatles and Hall & Oates. Yet many people take the message of the Crime Prevention Resource Center very seriously. They truly believe that liking a piece of music such as this one by Nine Inch Nails puts you on the same level as a member of a vicious gang like the Crips or the Bloods. Here's one more story about school. In 1987, XTC released a song called Dear God. When radio stations started playing it, many people, as you might guess, considered the song to be blasphemous and demanded that it not be played. One Florida radio station received a series of bomb threats, and in Binghamton, New York, a high school student took a secretary hostage in the principal's office and then demanded that Dear God be played over the school's PA system. Heat like this caused some stations to drop the song, killing XTC's chances of scoring a major hit.
Dear God, sorry to disturb you, but I feel that I should be heard loud and clear. We all need a big reduction in amount of tears.
We'll pick things up in a moment with some weird stories about music and government meddling. For a country that likes to carry on about their citizens' First Amendment rights, this is scary. Hang on. South of the border, despite all their bluster about First Amendment rights and free speech, various levels of American government, prompted by special interest groups, are constantly hounded to do something about certain types of music. This is something we touched on with part 1 of this program when we discussed the PMRC, the infamous Parents Music Resource Group. But we can go all the way back to the 1920s if you want. Back then, some people were offended by what they were hearing over this new gadget called a radio. They found the lyrics to some of the songs rather questionable, and they wanted the government to do something. Another group of concerned citizens was so outraged by some of what they heard that they launched a campaign to have radio stations banned from playing jazz on Sundays. That was evil, apparently. Through the 30s, 40s, and 50s, there were campaigns to ban radio stations from playing rhythm and blues music. In other words, music by black people. That was dirty music, they said. Now, you're probably saying to yourself, wow, that was then. We're much more enlightened now, aren't we? Well, not really. There are many conservative groups, especially in the U.S. South, that exert considerable pressure on lawmakers. And rather than picket Marilyn Manson concerts, these groups petition legislatures to pass laws that put the squeeze on certain types of music. For example, there was a bill in Louisiana that sought to prohibit the sale and distribution of lyrics harmful to minors. Now, in Louisiana, a minor is an unmarried person under the age of 17. Now, that means, of course, that you could be 13 and married and be able to go and buy a Marilyn Manson record. But anyway, this law defined lyrics harmful to minors as any phonographic record, album, cassette, compact disc, or tape recording which has as its basic theme the advocation or encouragement of rape, incest, bestiality, sadomasochism, prostitution, homicide, unlawful ritualistic acts, suicide, the commission of crimes because of the victim's sex, race, color, religion, or natural origin, the use of controlled substances, or the unlawful use of alcohol, and which has a label or other indicator that its lyrics may be explicit. Did you get that? In other words, selling a Marilyn Manson CD to an unmarried 17-year-old could cost a store $2,000. Georgia is also looking at a similar law. In Michigan and New Jersey, the state Senate are trying to pass a concert rating system similar to what we have for movies. This would deny anybody under the age of 18 entrance to a Marilyn Manson show. If the cops catch anyone under 18 at the gig, under these proposals, venue owners and promoters would face fines of up to $5,000 and jail time of 90 days. So what are the bands are we talking about? Well, the usual suspects. You got Rob Zombie, you got Marilyn Manson, and you got Korn. Here's a really sneaky way of exerting pressure to censor music. You get your local government to pass something called a divestiture law. This is what's happening in places like Texas and Maryland. What it means, simply, is certain laws are passed that oblige state governments and state agencies from investing in any company that either distributes or owns a controlling interest in any company that is involved in what they consider to be objectionable music. Retirement and pension funds are a good example. This money is invested in the stock market so that the fund will grow, and in many cases we're talking about very large sums of money. Let's say a chunk of a teacher's pension fund is invested in Seagram, which owns Universal Music, the largest major record label in the world. Universal is the home of bands like Marilyn Manson, who of course is one of the prime targets in this battle. A divestiture law might force that teacher's pension fund to dump all its Seagram stock in retaliation for Universal's continued support of Marilyn Manson. And because it wouldn't be unusual for a fund to hold maybe $100 million worth of Seagram stock, dumping all those shares could have a very negative impact on Seagram's stock, driving it down. Other shareholders might start to complain and exert pressure on the board to do something, even if it means just dumping the offending act. Here's one more example of subtle government censorship. In the spring of 1997, a Florida legislator named John Grant was extremely mad at WMNF, a local public radio station. He felt that for a station that lived on public funds and government grants, some of its programming was inappropriate. He did not want taxpayers' money going to support such filth. And he was successful. He pushed through an initiative that withheld more than $100,000 from the radio station as punishment. Now, $100,000 will make a big hole in anyone's budget, especially the budget of a public radio station. So what was one of the station's major crimes? Frequent on-air praise for a musician named Kurt Cobain.
And there we go with a trip deep into the vault of the ongoing history of new music. A reminder that there are hundreds of ongoing history shows available on demand as podcasts. They're all free. Download them wherever you get your podcasts. And also, don't forget, I have Uncharted, Crime and Mayhem in the Music Industry. That's my Music Meets True Crime podcast. And there are a couple of episodes there that deal with music and censorship, just in case you want to go deeper. We can connect on most of the social media networks. I'm always updating my website with music news and information and recommendations and opinion. You'll find that at ajournalofmusicalthings.com. Comes with a free newsletter that you should get. And you can also email me about anything. I'm available through alan@alancross.ca. Technical productions by Rob Johnston. Talk to you next time. I'm Alan Cross.